Hello, so I recently just found out that my dad/father, the man I've been told was my dad my entire life, actually isn't. The way I found this out is probably the most fucked up part. I've always had my doubts growing up. I didn't look the same, the way I acted wasn't similar to anyone else. I just always had a gut feeling. Even as a kid we'd joke about what if I'm adopted, or something similar to that. I don't even remember exactly what day this news was given to me. But I overheard my parents arguing like always. So I didn't think much of it. Suddenly I hear my mom yell to everyone, "Family meeting in our room, now." We haven't done that in years, so I knew something was wrong. But never would have guessed that. I walk in the room. Mind you, I was in the middle of one of my favorite animes, while things were getting good. So I walk in with a half smile, I crack a few jokes. But everyone else is so straight-faced. My dad tried to speak. My mom instantly shut that down. Right then and there all my suspicions just flooded my mind all over again. There's no way she's gonna say what I think she's gonna say. And, without hesitation, "Baby, I'm so sorry. We've kept a secret from you for so long, and since it's being held over my head, now is the time for you and everyone to know. Your dad who you know isn't your real dad." I laughed a little bit, still trying to process what I just heard. 'Cause 1. There's no way I was right, that's impossible. 2. Why wait this long to tell me? 3. Everything is a lie. I stormed out the room so fast and grabbed my car keys. I just wanted to leave and drive just to drive. I know what some people say, he raised you. This happened on September 25th, 2021. I went to a festival and I took about 500 UG of LSD as well as some MDMA. I had also taken 200 UG of these same tabs on a previous trip, and noting that they were extremely strong, far stronger than any other 200 UG I had taken. I really enjoyed that last trip and decided to go even stronger. My curiosity for so-called bad trips was surging, and I wondered if I ever had one. I had read about truly terrifying ones, but never experienced one. I wanted to test myself because I believed I was such a mentally strong character it was impossible to have one. So, I went with 2 friends at nighttime to a big abandoned haunted house. I hadn't been before. We cycled for half an hour to get there. We ended up not even finding the house because the tabs kicked in before we got there, and we got off the bikes, hid them beside the haunted house, then walked for miles not being able to find it. It was still an exciting adventure, but a different story. After this I concluded that I would never have a bad trip, and I was too mentally strong to let such a thing oppress me. I was merely wrong. I traveled to this festival with 4 friends, Kyle, Alejandro, Eric, and Joe. We had a room booked in a hotel 20 minutes walk from the festival. This was a budget trip for all of us, so not one of us had any alcohol, just the drugs of our choice. We arrived and checked in, got ready and headed. I wanted the LSD to kick in at the right time and for it to peak when it got dark so I could trip seeing lights and colors everywhere. I took the stamps walking to the festival and they began to kick in quite fast. The come-up began in the queue. An enjoyable feeling, which was accompanied by the stupidity that I had forgotten my ID. As we were walking, Kyle and I stopped to buy sunglasses to cover our eyes. The other 3 continued on because they didn't want to be late. Although Alejandro planned to take the LSD with me. There was a tab and a half for him and 2 and a half for me. I had all 4 tabs on me, so he didn't get to take it until later. I also had a gram of MDMA. Kyle and I somehow ended up taking a different route to the rest of them, so we didn't find them until later. When we are queuing, I realized that I've forgotten my ID. Luckily, Kyle had an old ID that he gave to me. This worked, so I end up walking around with Kyle's ID for the day. I decided to take the tabs, and as we are queuing, and hid everything else in the back of my phone case, so I could give to Alejandro later. The tabs kicked in quite fast, and by the time we get inside I am getting visuals, seeing patterns everywhere. Colors also looked amazingly satisfying. This was quite magical, as most trips are. As I start to lose my train of thought in the enjoyment, it starts to become more difficult to get in touch with everyone else. We are walking around for quite a while trying to meet up and eventually find them. At this point it is very intense. I start to get an unusual sense that something bad will happen. It was like I subconsciously knew things weren't going to go well. I took absolutely no notice of it and continued to enjoy myself, but deep down I am a little bit nervous something would happen. Kyle and Eric went to the toilets, while the rest of us went to get a drink from the pint stands. I still had Kyle's ID for the drinks. The queues were big, and this took a while but eventually got them. Now Alejandro wants his tabs. We are in a safe place, I believe, as Alejandro is pretty much sober at this point. He was asking me to get them. I was super paranoid that security or someone was going to catch me pulling them out. At this point all I could see was any of my friends that were within a meter's radius. Beyond that was just worlds of color and hectic dimensions. I told Alejandro that I was going to go to the cubicles to take them out. So, we went. The first thing I hear when I get in there is a long snorty sniffle in the cubicle beside me. This anxious, uneasy feeling was still there, and it was somewhat beginning to annoy me. The sniffle next door hints at me to take some of the MDMA that I had while I was there, and hopefully the ecstasy buzz will remove any nerves. Terrible decision. I left the cubicle, completely forgetting to get the tabs for Alejandro. I walked back over to my group of friends. Alejandro asks for the tabs, and I tell him that I completely forgot. They all laugh with me and then tell me to just take them out. So, I took the tabs out and gave them to him. Next, Kyle and I run into an old friend from school. We end up talking to him for a while, and the rest of the guys went off with some girls. So once again we are separated. The three of us try to get a better place in the festival, closer to the music. I don't know what came over me, but after a while I wanted to spend time in the festival enjoying the music on my own. Very unusual of me, but anyway, I left. At first when I left, I was enjoying myself. I was listening to the music while heavily hallucinating on all the colors. It starts to get more intense, and this is where everything begins to go downhill. I am starting to notice that I am getting dirty looks from people. People are shoving me out of the way. I have started to become uncontrollably messy, just bumping into people, and have not noticed. I would then begin to walk away from these people and go somewhere else. Everywhere was packed and I couldn't even see as to where I could get some space. I would forget about the dirty looks and shoving for a minute. I would dance for a minute with a random person, then another one, and a few more. Then someone would shove me again, initiating a fight. This was the beginning of a loop. Not just a thought loop, but a live loop where I was repeatedly realizing how clumsy and messy I was being, get shoved around for it, getting into fights with people, leaving, and start again. It was a constant back and forth from enjoying myself, to getting into fights that I had no clue why they were starting. After some time, I realized it was loop. I had experienced thought loops before, nothing too crazy as I usually find it quite easy to break out of them. I simply think of something else. This loop was different. Not only was it in my head, but it was physically happening too. Not something I had ever experienced. As my head had been going back and forth from enjoyment to dumbass getting pushed, I got a burst of excitement when I realized it was a loop. I took it as a challenge to break the loop. My first attempt was to charge through everyone until I got to the end of the pack and had space to sit down and relax. This resulted in a lot of people pushing me, angry looks, walk away, back to dancing. I am right back in the loop. The loop has now been extended. Every couple of minutes I would again realize I am in a loop and attempt to charge again. After I don't know how many times, I begin to realize that I am fucking terrified. It seemed that the crowd of people was never ending and I was stuck in a realm where there was infinite people raving with no end and no access to any space. I shout at the top of my lungs, "This is the scariest shit of my life." This results in more weird looks and a wave of embarrassment come over me. I move again, I am back in the loop. I can remember a feeling that my body was out of control. Like my brain wasn't even sending signals to my motor nerves and every one of my movements were some sort of demon inside of me. This demon would leave for a couple of seconds every time I figured out I was in a loop. The next addition to the loop is quite difficult to explain. I begin to think that every single person at the festival has the exact same personality as me and is facing the same loop. I felt we were all in competition to figure out how to end the loop and that was why I was getting into fights with people. They're all mirroring me. I would dance and clap hands high in the air with someone, with maybe 6 people surrounding me. I would then enter back into one of those 6 people and 2 new people would go into the middle. This would happen repeatedly. 8 people in some kind of synchronic routine, switching back and forth from dancing to fighting. As well as that, the infinite realm of millions of other groups of 8 people surrounding us were doing the exact same routine. And the clap hands in the middle of each set of 8 people would happen simultaneously. This is like pattern effects of LSD playing to the most extreme I have ever witnessed. So, I am going back and forth from fun dancing to fighting, and every so often trying to break the loop. I have no idea how many times this happened. I must have had at minimum 5 big fights. Obviously I won all of them. It felt like it was going on for days on end. My body was so physically tired, but it wouldn't stop moving. I felt like I was punished in a similar manner to Sisyphus. The pain just went on forever. I can remember multiple instances where I would attempt to break the loop and simply just drop to the floor, hoping that I would wake up in my bed at home. This didn't work in some instances. The entire realm of people dropped together with me and we all had to fight to get back up. My body just wouldn't shut off, as each time I dropped, I woke back up and instantly returned to the nightmare. The movement from exciting and enjoyable dancing and back into fighting began to become more and more extreme. Every time the dance trance was over, a wave of darkness overcame the entire realm. As it appeared that everyone was facing the same thing as me and everybody was mirroring me, we would all look at each other in fear, as we knew it was going to become violent. I could see panic across the entire realm. Everyone would then turn into a savage and fight all at once. We would all knock each other out at the same time. Then someone would shout, "It's getting good again," and everyone would return to drugged-out ecstatic times. The dark waves of returning to hell were truly terrifying, and returning to happiness realm was euphoric. The loop kept on getting faster and faster, with each realm becoming more exaggerated. Here are a few random events that happened before I broke the loop. One of the visuals was Alejandro and Joe appearing. I grabbed onto them and told them not to leave because I am so confused. I try to explain to them what is happening, and the next thing I remember is that they are gone. It happened in the space of a couple of seconds. Another time I visualized myself in an entirely different life, as a lion. I enjoyed being a lion in a safari for 10 years before dying and coming back to hell. Eventually, I can see a spiked fence. Trees and such were also above it. I realized it was a chance to break my loop, if I can get to the space behind the fence. I focus all of my energy on going in a straight line, until I reach the fence. Instantly I climb it, and as I pull myself up and once my waist is above the top of it, I somersault my body forward and land on my back. I am delighted that there is peace. I lie down in a trance. I am still in a very confused state. I stare into the trees, happy that it is all over. I am approached by a policeman. I stand up, to give him awareness that I am okay. He asks me what I am doing. I reply that I couldn't find my way out and I was lost. Without warning, he grabs my arm and swings me to the ground. Another fight. I must escape. I squabble on the floor with him. I manage to break myself free and I just run. Next, I am chased by more police. 3 of them now. They tackle me. I fight to get up with everything I can. I manage to stand up with an officer holding onto my ankle. I stomped on his hand and break free. I bolt again, quickly chased after by more police. I have no idea how long I was running for, but the next thing I know, I am cornered by 5 or 6 police. They withdraw their batons as they move closer to me. They appeared to me as big, red, ugly, hellish demons, wearing a blue police vest. They were monsters so much bigger than me. As their batons were close enough to strike, I remember covering my face with my arms to protect myself. I am stricken by multiple batons until I am on the ground. I start to go in and out of being conscious. They are handcuffing me, and in my unconscious state I enter another visual where I am behind bars. I spend a whole lifetime behind bars and battling with authorities. When I wake up, I am underneath piles of police. I remember giving in, then changing my mind and trying one more time to escape. My mind looped on this as I pictured images of being locked up and then realizing that there was no escape. I have no recollection of being transported anywhere. I think that I have gone unconscious for the next while. The next thing I remember is being on a chair, completely tied up. I am handcuffed, my ankles and knees are cable tied together, my upper body movement is also restricted by something. I visualize it to be some sort of torture den. There are entities that are slowly increasing the volume of torture. Starting with beatings and punches. Next there is some joint manipulation to every single one of my joints. My bones are being bent in ways they can't bend. At the same time, I am constantly being kicked by a mob of monsters. It seemed like a torture den, somewhere inside the hell realm. In the real world, I am in a police tent being beat up. They were angry that I was such a struggle to detain. They beat me black and blue, left bruises all over my body. Next, I would be cut up my leg with a knife. Wounds and gashes were left all over my body. The cable ties were on so tight that they were constantly cutting deeper into my ankles and knees. This went on for years. I remember a devil figure visiting me and telling me I was to face 700 years of torture. I began to loop again. The beatings would go from realistic kickings, being cut, my bones being twisted, and then turn really extreme. I would visualize every bit of my flesh ripped apart, with blood everywhere, then millions of knives entering my body all at once, in every different side of my body. Each knife aiming towards my heart. At some point I was flipped onto my front. My face was being shoved into the ground so that I could not breathe. Not being able to breathe was added to the torture loop. The police kept on twisting my arms behind my back. My mind exaggerated this to every single joint in my body being bent the wrong way. At every point I wasn't allowed to breathe. I felt I would get to a point where there was no oxygen at all in my brain. I would somewhat start to try to be at peace with myself. I thought that I had died, and I was trying to accept that I now had to be tortured so that I could become a stronger person so that I could enter my next life. Eventually when I realized how long it was going to go on for, I relaxed and grew completely numb to the torture. It still continued, but I no longer cared. After 700 years of torture, I am let out. I am in a state of dazzlement. I wake up to an angel saying to me, "Kyle, are you there? Kyle? Kyle? Hello, I am so happy to have woken up and there are no longer any monsters or demons." As I regain some more of my senses, I see that I am still handcuffed. I am naked with some sort of prison underwear. I realize that this angel I had pictured was a nurse trying to help me. "Kyle?" "I am not Kyle," I replied. They had found Kyle's ID and figured that it was me. I appeared to be in a dark cartoon. I have an unusual tunnel vision too. There was some confusion, and I did my best to explain that I wasn't Kyle. They eventually understood. They asked me for my real details, and I gave them. "What is your date of birth?" "September 25th, 2001. "He's turned 20. "Wow, what a day to have your birthday." I noticed there were 2 officers of some sort behind her. I don't know if they were police anymore, but I viewed them as evil. Next, these officers take my phone away. This riles me up as all I can think of is that I need that phone to get back to my hotel safe. I start shouting at them and suddenly, I am unconscious again. I don't know if they hit me unconscious or if I just passed out. Once we get near to the cell, I realize what is happening and I try to run, but they have a firm grip of me. I realize that there is no point and accept that I am being locked up. I see a thin blue mattress. It was uncomfortable, but I was too tired to care. I wake up and it was bright, and the first thing I see is my balloon-sized right hand. It looked completely distorted. There wasn't a single knuckle visible. There were huge cuts the full way around the circumference of my wrist. I look at my left hand and it is in similar condition, just a little less swollen. At some stage I was offered phone calls. I told them to give me my phone so I could call someone, as I didn't know of any numbers. They refused and asked me for the password, so they could get the numbers for me. I declined. I go back to sleep, to be woken up later by a man offering me food. I told him to fuck off. It is dark out again, so I go back to sleep. I mostly slept from Saturday evening when I got locked up, until Monday morning I woke up properly. It was 8 a.m. I was put on the phone to a lawyer. I spoke to him, and I was told I was being brought to court at 9:30 a.m. After that I continued to ring the bell every 10 minutes, asking for the time. They get frustrated with me, but I keep ringing. They brought me to court at around 11 a.m. and let me out on bail. They charged me for assault of policemen, alleging that I had kicked one of them in the groin twice. I spent a while battling it in courts before deciding to settle on an agreement where I didn't get charged with anything and I didn't press any charges on them. Although the loop when I was in the festival was pretty scary, I enjoyed it. It was like a real-life horror film. I was certainly proven wrong about not being able to have a bad trip.